Okay, again, welcome to Athens, and I want to begin by asking you to reflect on the conference theme. What do you think is significant in terms of sports and development in general?
Well, this theme is looking particularly at gender and sport in Africa. I think it is relevant in a number of ways. First of all, Africa is a country that still has many development challenges, and I see sport as really one of the key kinds of interventions when it comes to development. Why is that? Well, if you look at developing countries today, and certainly Africa has many of them, the population is a young population. Half the population is 18 or below. Sport is something that really energizes this population. Secondly, this also has the point of gender sport in Africa. And that is critical because, frankly, until girls and women are empowered, at least in my personal view, we're not really going to have development. And the impact of sport when it comes to girls and women is very important. So I think this is a subject that is a really operational one, even though it's in an academic context. I think this is one for practitioners as well as academicians.
Okay. You touched on some of the examples about changing or trying to use sports as an intervention for girls in particular, or women in particular, and their social development. And I want to know if you can kind of touch on that again in terms of looking at how sports can be very segregated in terms of gender. And you talked about that in your presentation tonight. Well,
again, we talk about sport for all, and very often it becomes very elite, and that tends to be male rather than female. We also talk about sport in schools, but again, unless there's been some real work done, that tends to be for the boys rather than girls. And yet, girls are in need of the same kind of self-respect, development, learning of rules, learning to win, learning to lose, the whole development of the entire person, which sport can assist with. Additionally, the majority of kids who ought to be in school who are not in school are girls, and yet that sport sometimes can be an incentive for girls to come to school. So certainly one should never immediately think boys and men when one thinks sports. One should at least think girls and women as soon as we think men and boys.
And getting to the whole area of exploitation in terms of looking at how women are exploited in the way that they're presented in sports, in terms of media, in terms of how some women are glorified in terms of the way they look in not only the United States but around the world. And I'm getting at this whole idea that women in sport are not taken as serious except in certain areas as men are, where sport is seen more as a predominant force that kind of push masculine identity or masculine issues.
Well, certainly in what I would consider the industrialized world, the developed world, if one follows the money, as Willie Sutton, the bank robber, used to say, I rob banks because that's where the money is. The money is in male sports and not in female sports for the most part. Every once in a while there's a small change in that. And frankly, in developing countries as well. In most of the countries, if you look at the local or the National Football Association, it's mostly men at this point. And so the role of women is very often relegated to the advertising that goes on, whether it's the advertiser supporting the sporting event. And only in limited circumstances, when in fact there's a terrific woman athlete, people go, wow, look at that, rather than if there's a terrific male athlete, they may go, wow, but they expect that to be so. That's why it's really, in my view, important not to wait until that point, but to be really working with girls. You know, have the girls be good and not good, just like the boys are good and not good, but they get some self-esteem and self-respect.
In some ways, it seems as though it's a re-education of the way we think of girls and women, and in general, sports for social development, sports as an agent of change.
Well, I think if we think of sport as one of the key factors in the development of a human being, not as something where you are advertising a product or you're on a particular team, but say, what is it that really can help a human being develop into being a good human being? Seems to me girls and women have every right to be develop into a good human being as boys and men. And that's why I think it's important to keep bringing sport back to its reality. Not the elite sport, of course that exists, but back to its self-respect, its esteem, its human development, it's learning to play, it's carving out time. Every human being has a right to this.
And you talked about some of those values that sport in general gives us, and as individuals, as we play, and later children, whether they're boys or girls, should also be instilled with these kinds of values and the value of physical education.
Well, and again, the majority of what that adult is going to be as a human being is developed when he or she is very young. And even when they're babies, and so the holding of the children, allowing the child to crawl, allowing the child to play, giving the child something to touch, coaching the child, teamwork for the child. These are all things that contribute to the socialization and are quite values-driven. Tolerance, respecting people on the other team. They may look different than you are. They may beat you. It's okay. You may beat them. It's okay, and you shouldn't feel that you're superior to them. These are all things that really have much broader implications than who won the game, who was the coach, and what was the game.
Talking about it from the developing countries' perspective in terms of looking at sports in developing countries, many countries don't have the infrastructure or even the means, the economic means. You talk about a global scorecard. How could those countries be assisted either on an international basis or through non-government organizations to help them mainstream sports, so to speak?
Well, first, I think we have to think that sport doesn't have to be terribly expensive. I mean, for a football game, you need 4 rocks, 2 goals, 2 for each of the goals, and a ball or something round. That being said, there does need to be some investment. In my experience in developing countries, indeed in developed, is that for children generally, the resources for sport is quite limited. But I mean, it's money well spent and with a multiplier effect in terms of that money, recognizing that it isn't just sport as a silo, but that helps in the full development of the individual. So I do think that when one's looking at countries and their commitment to development, investing in the sports of their children, not just the sports of their most famous player, is one of those indicators that reflects how committed a country is to development.
And then the last question, you talked about the challenges that you lay out for this conference. For those involved in the conference in academia as well, could you kind of re-emphasize some of those challenges that you say they need to continue to strive for?
Well, I think we have to start looking more in a more analytical way. Rather than just stories, oh, we know that sport works. Let's really do some of the analysis and find out, is school attendance really increasing as a result of sport? What do we know about what's going on in countries? Therefore, some kind of a scorecard. Are we really mainstreaming sport as part of development interventions, or is it something on the side? Are sports figures understanding that the power they have to influence some of these issues and being encouraged to do that? So I think that this is a very important conference, and there need to be good discussions, but I also think out of each conference should come some action points and building of networks to try and pursue these action points.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.